Members, good morning. It's the appointed time and there is a quorum. Let's call the meeting to order. This is the first meeting in the lunar year of the pig, so best wishes. We have 8 discussion papers today, and before the meeting, the government has submitted the paper ECI 2018-1914 for members' reference. The paper lists the changes in the number of approved directorate posts since 2002 and the impact of the 8 discussion items on the directorate establishment. Let me remind members that if you have a direct or indirect pecuniary interest in the matters to be discussed, please, in accordance with ROP 83A, disclose the nature of that interest before you speak. I would like members to pay attention to ROP 84 in relation to voting in case of a direct pecuniary interest being involved. Item 1, EC 2018-1919. And that is on the proposed creation of the supernumerary post of Senior Principal Executive Officer D2 in the Tourism Commission, the Commerce, Industry and Tourism branch of the CEDB for a period of 24 months with immediate effect upon approval of the FC to lead a preparatory team to plan and implement the preparatory work for the establishment of the Travel Industry Authority and a new regulatory regime of the travel industry. The government consulted the Economic Development Panel of the LegCo on the 17th of July last year. We have from the CEDB Undersecretary for CED, Dr. Bernard Chan, Mr. Eric Liu, Deputy Commissioner for Tourism, and Mr. Nicky Ng, Assistant Commissioner for Tourism. Mr. Felix Chung is the chairman of the Economic Development Panel. So can I now invite him to say something about the panel's discussion? Mr. Felix Chung is not here yet, so I will report on his behalf. The EDP discussed this item on the 17th of July last year. Members generally support the proposal. During the deliberations, some members believe that the administration should create this post as soon as possible to deal with the preparatory work for the TIA. As far as the person is concerned, the person must possess a wealth of administrative experience. He should also possess experience in relation to tourism and licensing matters. And members have asked for a timetable from the administration on the preparatory work, and the relevant information was given to member via paper CB bracket 41519/1718 bracket 01. So 3 members have indicated the wish to ask a question. Mr. Yu Siwing, Mr. Xiu Ka-Fai, and Mr. Alvin Yin. 5 minutes each. Mr. Yu, you go first. Thank you, Chairman. The sector and the community as a whole support the the establishment of the TIA. The law enforcement on unlicensed travel agents and travel guides and travel escorts is undertaken by the TIC and the TAR. So there are limitations to the law enforcement powers of these 2 bodies. So we are seeing now unlicensed travel agents and unlicensed travel escorts, and we can do nothing about this. Now, after the TIA has been established, I believe that there would be substantial improvement. And also the modus operandi has now changed, and a number are offering online products. And the existing law cannot cope with the new operation mode. My question is, Madam Chair, you have talked about the relevant post duties. During the 2 years transition period, there will be a lot of problems envisaged. We have to set up the TIA, and we have to take over certain duties from the TIC. So is 2 years enough? If it is not adequate, well, this post will only last for 2 years. So what will happen after 2 years? Will the duties be handed over to whoever is going to succeed the post, or will you be asking for an extension of the post then, or should you now be asking for 3 years instead of 2 years now? Madam Chair referred to also the experience of the post holder. If you find someone who doesn't have tourism experience, then that will do no good. So what will the government do to allay our concerns concerning experience of the post holder? Now, there will be a transition or take over duties of TIC. So how would you reassure the TIC staff members? They are getting worried. There are now some 60 to 70 staff members. How can you reassure them in the course of the transition or the handover? Dr. Chen, I would like to thank Mr. Yu. And I agree with what he said. After the TIA is established, we would be dealing with unlicensed cases more effectively. Now, we have a dual-track system. We have the TAR and the TIC now separately dealing with regulatory and licensing matters. And all these will be amalgamated in the future and to be dealt with by the TIA. And so that will be enhancement to the regime. Now, as to whether 2 years are sufficient, during those 2 years, there will be a lot of tasks to be undertaken, as mentioned by the member. Administrative guidelines, procedures have to be set up. We have to identify officers, and then we have to set up the IT system. We have to recruit staff. We have to make transitional arrangements, including what Mr. Yu said. Under the new regime, subsidiary legislation has to be set up, and we have to deal with matters in relation to licensing and regulation, and we have to take over the records of travel tourist guides and tour escorts of the TIC. So we believe that 2 years should be sufficient for us to cover all the tasks mentioned. Of course, we'll have to depend on the actual circumstances. If there is a need to extend the period of the post, then we will do so, make an application in accordance with the established mechanism. The second question about the experience of the post holder. Many TIC staff members have rich experience, including formulating the sector guidelines and etc. So after the TIA is established, when it recruits staff members, TIC staff members will be considered. The third part of your question, the role of the TIC. Why is it not 3 years and not 2 years? Going by our experience, say, like that in the insurance authority, we asked for a 2-year post. We would be following the same pattern. Would you come back and ask for extension? Madam Chair, we think that 2 years is a reasonable time period. We believe that the tasks can be completed. But of course, if there are unexpected events, and then we will come back to the electrical to seek an extension. Mr. Peter Shield, thank you, Madam Chair. The creation of this post will help substantially with the tourism development in Hong Kong. In the past year, well, there has been a rise of 30% in the number of visitors in February. And that will give a great boost to Hong Kong's economy, including hotel, catering, retail sectors. And that will help in the employment situation in Hong Kong as well. But then the influx of the tourists poses impact on people's livelihood. How can we make sure that the tour groups will visit the right places in Hong Kong to minimize the nuisance caused to Hong Kong people? I believe that the TIA will put in a new regulatory regime, And I hope that emphasis can be put in that regard so that there will be less conflicts between tourists and Hong Kong people. I support setting up the TIA overseeing these two organizations. We talk about the preparatory work for the TIA and the new regulatory regime. Does it mean that pending the filling of the post, nothing can be done? I agree with Mr. Peter Schill. After the creation of the post, we can adopt a more targeted approach in dealing with problems caused by visitors to certain districts. And one of the aims of the TIA is to stamp out the unlicensed tour agents or tour agents of the mainland organizing tours to Hong Kong, and many problems stem from the zero tour fare groups. So if that can be clamped down on, we believe that the problems at the district can be mitigated. Now, before the setting up of the TIA, what can we do? Now, in previous electrical meetings and panel meetings, we also said that the TIC now is doing a lot to combat the problem, say for in advising the relevant tour agents, and then we have the score system for some shops and score deduction systems. And Q1 this year, we will ensure that shops will have to submit a proper crowd control plan to the TIC before the license is renewed. So through such measures, we believe that the impact on residents in the districts can be mitigated. Now, we will be creating this post, but before the post is filled, does it mean that you are still proceeding with the preparation of the setting up of the TIA? Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, member, for your follow-up question. We now have a dual-track system. We have the TAR, the tour guides and the tour escorts have to follow the relevant guidelines. But how come that this post, it is said to be dealing with these two matters? Well, who will take that question? This is a directorate post, and he will be steering the preparatory team. And there are 8 other non-directorate staff members on that team. And Mr. Xiu is concerned whether we will do nothing pending the establishment of this post. Now, after the bill was enacted in November, starting the end of last year, we have been redeploying such non-directorate staff to proceed with the preparatory work. But then this is going to be a complicated task, and we hope that the directorate staff member can come on board as soon as possible. But we are proceeding with works on other fronts already. So we support it, and please proceed ASAP with the work. Mr. Alvin Yang, we support and agree to the establishment of the TIA, and we also support the creation of this post. It's just that we want to know more about the details, especially the timing, whether there is a pressing need to establish this post. And now on the 17th of July meeting of the EDP, the government has submitted a paper to us, and that the duties of the task is similar to that listed in paragraph 10 of the paper.
But on that paper, we were given a timetable. So I would like to find out this. So now, if this proposal is passed by us and then is submitted to the FC, then I think the funding will only be approved in the second quarter. So I would like to ask the administration. In July last year, you provided us with a paper, and that was a timetable. Is the timetable different now? Do you have different thinkings? And do you have an updated timetable? In particular, before you submit the paper to the FC, can you tell us what you will do step by step in the future? And also, I would like to talk to the government. Now, when you submit proposals to the FC, you should accord priorities to different proposals. So for proposals like this, which is not very controversial, it's less controversial, then maybe you should push it back, and then we can discuss the more controversial issues first. That would be more efficient. And the Secretary, thank you for your support, Mr. Young. In terms of timetable, there has been no change. In July, we submitted a paper to the panel. We expect that by the first quarter of this year, the proposal can be submitted to the FC for approval. So the timetable has not changed. So you have the confidence that you can do that. If things are not changed, then you would submit the proposal to FC in the first quarter, and then in the second quarter, the post can be created, right? Yes. In paragraph 10 of the paper, under H, to conduct trade consultation and public education, I would like to know more. Now, when the TIA takes shape, who will be responsible for consulting the trade? Is it related to the President's post? Thank you for your question. As for consulting the trade, the TIC has a very close connections with the trade. So in the future, when the trade is consulted, TIC will still play an important role, and TIA would have a lot of subcommittees and committees or task forces. So some members of the trade will be sitting on these committees so that their views can be heard. So what you mean is that in the future, for trade consultation, TIC will be responsible, and for this post, it will be facilitating the consultation. Or will there be consultations outside this framework? Within this framework, we already have a very good mechanism. There are different task forces and committees for trade consultation. As for the role of TIC, we also attach a lot of importance to it in the future. Mr. Ho Kai-ming, Madam Chair, now when we scrutinized the TIA bill, we had some views. In particular, we are not happy with the protection of the frontline workers. And now there are a lot of problems concerning the tourism industry, in particular in Kowloon City and To Kwa Wan. So some of the frontline practitioners are not employed. They are regarded as self-employed persons, and they are not well protected. We hope that their protection and insurances can be included in the ordinance, but now the government resorts to administrative guidelines, and on page 3 we can see some of them. But when it comes to the details concerning the posts, I cannot see this. So does it mean that the government doesn't think it's important? So that's why you haven't included it in the job description of the Assistant Commissioner for Tourism. And just now, the Undersecretary has talked about the TIC's future work, and I am quite surprised to hear that. You are very concerned about NCSC, and the administration has been telling us that they have a lot of experiences in that, and all the recruitment will be open to the public. Well, for these people who are already working in the government, I hope that we can retain them so that we can use their experiences. But the government doesn't promise us that they will do it. But for TIC staff, the Undersecretary said that they will be potential candidates. So will they be enjoying better terms than NCSCs? I'm not saying that these people should go out of job, but if that's the government's answer, I want it to be clarified. So for NCSCs, should they also be potential candidates? Should they not be regarded just ordinary candidates because they have relevant experiences? I would like to clarify a point about your second point. Yes, there will be open recruitment. But for TIC staff, they have relevant experiences. So when it comes to the public recruitment, we would welcome them to apply. And for part one of your question, first of all, I would like to thank Mr. Yu and the committees under the TIC. They have had lengthy discussions concerning frontline workers or the self-employed staff, as well as their protection and insurances. I would like to thank Mr. Yu. Well, yes, for the self-employed persons, we are still working hard. We hope that we can reach consensus. A lot of trade unions and travel agent representatives have been talking to us in the past few months. Now we are still ironing out the details. Consensus has not been reached yet, but we are moving in the right direction. We hope that we can further protect our frontline workers. And the Secretary, so after the establishment of the TIA, there will be insurances. Can there be a performance pledge that is for the self-employed persons? You can offer them insurances. I do not regard them as self-employed persons, but I'm sure that insurances should be provided to them so that they can have better protection when they work. Thank you for your question. As I said just now, after establishing the TIA, we will through a series of administrative measures to do all this. As I said just now, this direction is correct and we will endeavor. So after establishing the TIA, you will have administrative measures in place, or after the fight, you will just let things go, because the administrative measures that will be implemented by you. Can you give us a clearer answer, Under Secretary? Now, in the course of discussions and negotiations, I cannot tell you when a consensus can be reached. In the past few months, with the help of Mr. Yu and with the hard work of different committees, I thought that we could reach a consensus. However, because of some minor details, we couldn't reach a consensus. So I can only tell you that we will work hard. I think this is too abstract. I will continue to ask questions. Mr. Wu Chiwai. Now, for the preparatory work, even though the supernumerary post is not created yet, preparations are still being done, right? If that is the case, can you tell us about the progresses of different tasks? For example, from the fourth quarter last year to the first quarter of this year, you are supposed to appoint the chairman and the members of the TIA. So have all these problems be resolved? Mr. Liu? Yes, before the creation of this post, some non-directorate posts are working already, but of course these are advanced work. For example, doing researches, collecting background information, etc. In the first quarter of this year, we are supposed to make appointments. Now we are working on it. We are collecting information. We hope that this post can be created as soon as possible so that the work can be carried to another level. I'm not challenging that whether this post should be created. I'm just asking about the progress. theoretically, after the passage of the bill, I believe the government is already doing its work. And under the TIA ordinance, the most important thing is that you should appoint an executive director first. With the executive director, many more tasks can be carried out. So in accordance with your timetable, in the latter half of 2019, the executive director should take up the post. So after the executive director starts working, what will be the duties of this new post? Maybe you do not need 2 years for this post. So do you have a mechanism? And that is, after the executive director takes up the job, this newly created post can be cancelled. As for progress, we have explained earlier to LegCo, in the coming 2 years, there will be a lot of preparatory works. For example, establishing the TIA, recruiting staff, including the executive director. So all this will be done step by step. So after appointing the executive director and the relevant staff, they cannot start work overnight, because we would have to recruit about 90 people. If we can appoint the executive director by the end of this year, it doesn't mean that he can do all his jobs immediately. There will be a transitional period, and the work of the preparatory team will be handed over to the TIA in a gradual and orderly manner. We have also taken reference from other experiences. So this is about the right timetable. So this paper tells us that, well, in about early April, you can get a funding from the FC. And in the middle or by the end of this year, you should have an executive director. So for the handing over period, I don't think it should be as long as 1 year and 3 months. If that is the case, the executive director would not be too capable. So is this arrangement necessary? And after handing over the work, theoretically, the TIA will start working. So can this assistant commissioner do some other work? Well, other than the handing over, there are also other tasks. For example, coordination among different government departments. And the TAR is also a small unit under the government, and the work of the TAR will also be handed over to the TIA, and also we will have to enact subsidiary legislations, and the government has a role to play in enacting such legislations. And when it comes to prosecutions, preparatory work, there have to be a lot of coordinated works with the government too.
Madam Chair, can we ask the administration to draw up a list of timetable in relation to the tasks mentioned by the administration, and what is the follow-up work to be embarked on? Mr. Liu, no problem. Yes, do you mean that we provide information after the meeting? Yes. Mr. Huden Chow. Thank you, Madam Chair. the TIA's establishment will help strengthen regulatory work, and we need more manpower. That's all understandable. And in paragraph 15, it said so clearly that the major duties of the post holder includes taking forward to facilitate the tourism development, including taking forward the overseeing the operation of the Kai Tak cruise terminal, and promoting the development of the cruise tourism of Hong Kong. Now, in the 140,000 square feet of commercial space, only 5,000 square feet is used for retail and commercial purpose, and the other areas is reserved for, say, purposes like customs clearance. Well, for those who visited the place, you know that the area was vacant. It was left idle. I hope that you can revitalize the area while putting more retail facilities to attract more tourists, and also try to make the best arrangement for incoming tourists. Since we have the new post, can we follow up on that, please? And also, in terms of the duties, it will also monitor the development of the Disneyland Resort. There is a phase 2 development site for Disneyland Resort. The area has been idled for a long time, and the Disneyland has come and obtained funding approval for some further development, but the area for phase 2 is still idle. So administration, would you be urging Disneyland to start work on phase 2 as soon as possible? And can you also think about some temporary use of the site? Well, Disneyland, does it fall under the work portfolio of that post holder? Thank you, Mr. Chow, for your question. On the cruise terminal, well, a ship calls every other day now already. And before the ship calls, we have to, and after the ship has called, we have to do certain work. And we do have a long-term plan for the cruise terminal. And for days where there are no ships call, I agree with the member that we'll try to encourage as many activities as possible to be held at the cruise terminal to enhance the attractiveness of the place to locals and tourists alike. Apart from the shops, well, in fact, all the shop space has been rented out, and we also arrange for pop-up stores to be set up during ship call days and non-ship call days. So retail activities can go on. Does this post holder take charge of the cruise terminal? No, let me clarify, it's not the case. In paragraphs 14 and 15, we talked about alternatives considered, i.e. whether other directorate staff at the Tourism Commission can be deployed to take up the extra duties. So we explained here that the workload is already very heavy, and they can't take up the extra work for the TIA. So we explained here that we already have a deputy commissioner who is overseeing Kai Tak Cruise Terminal and Disneyland Resort. He can't take on the extra duties. So, Mr. Chow, maybe you can take that up at some take up the issue at some other occasions. Madam Chair, that's okay. I just want to let my views known to them. Thank you, Madam Chair. Next one, Mr. Low, Dr. Low Wai Kwok. Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be very brief. I and the members of the BPA support the establishment of the TIA. So for this proposal to create the post, we support it. Members have a lot of views on existing tourism facilities, and I agree with Madam Chair that we should follow up on those issues duly at the panel. Now, on Kai Tak Cruise Terminal, when we discussed that at some other panel meetings, we haven't been able to hear from the government a good solution or proposal. We have a good cruise terminal at Ocean Terminal in Tsim Sha Tsui. And we have the commercial facilities, office facilities, and the hotels there, which form a cluster of functions very attractive to the tourists. And tourists can spend there, locals can also spend their time there. But the administration said that the same development will be happening in Kai Tak, but so far we haven't seen anything done. So that's what I want to say. But anyway, I support this proposal. Thank you. Next one, Mr. Yu Si-wing, second round. Thank you. I would like to follow up on an earlier question, and that is on the TIC and the transition and the arrangement for TIC staff. Will the administration talk to the TIC during the transition period? How would you deal with the staff members? Don't be so vague. Well, people will not be very happy. They will get worried during the transition period. So can you promise that you will come up with a timetable in relation to the handover and also the arrangement for the TIC staff members? Now, the post has not been created. What is now being done to ensure that there will not be a delay in the transition and the establishment of the TIA? Now, I would like to respond to Mr. Jonathan Hu's question. He referred to the issue of insurance. We originally had a consensus. However, because some trade unions disagreed with the details of the insurance proposal, so that was stalled. We will continue with the work, and self-employed tour guides and tour escorts will be provided with the appropriate insurance cover so that they will be protected duly. So who will take those questions? Mr. Liu. Thank you, Mr. Yu, for your question. On the timetable, of course, we will not procrastinate. We would try to do our best in setting up the TIA within the next 2 years. As for the arrangement for TIC staff, that is a concern of the member. The Undersecretary has said something already, and the TIA will be conducting an open recruitment exercise for its staff. And the TIC staff have a certain regulatory experience, and they will be given priority. We will take that on board when we do our recruitment. After the TIA is established, it will continue to discuss with the TIC on various issues. Actually, the two bodies are in close dialogue to make sure that there is good transition. And of course, that will cover the aspects of staff recruitment and the conditions of service and remuneration and so on. And we would have a full exchanges with the TIC on those aspects. Well, the TIA will be like what the other statutory bodies are doing, will conduct an open recruitment exercise. Now, before the post is created, what is now being done? I have also mentioned that briefly earlier. Before this directorate post is created, some non-directorate staff members are already working on advanced works, including researching on background information. So once the person is on board, then the work can be taken forward expeditiously in accordance with the timetable or schedule. And I think the progress so far is satisfactory. And so as far as insurance is concerned, please try to involve the sector as much as possible. Any further response on the issue of insurance? Well, thank you, Mr. Yu. We will continue to liaise closely with you. Mr. Au not here in first round. Madam Chair, following up on the first round of questions, concerning the transition of TIC staff to TIA, I think it's important that you take on those staff members. So you are talking about 2/3, and then you will be taking on 60, and there are remaining 40 staff members. What will happen to them? Would you be providing the information on the posts to be created in TIA to the TIC staff so that they know exactly what kind of posts they can apply? So in the next few years, what will you do? Secondly, the post holder should have certain knowledge of tourism and has experience in the tourism sector, or else he will not be able to handle complaints. In the paper, you said that that's going to be an onerous workload for the post holder, so that cannot be any internal redeployment of duties. So how can you make sure that this post holder can effectively lead the preparatory team? Who will take that question? Mr. Au, thank you for your question. As I said briefly, we believe that after the TIA has been established, we will be providing sufficient information on recruitment, because after it's an open recruitment exercise, anyone interested will know about the relevant information. And for those interested in the posts, they are more than welcome to ask us questions. We'll be responding to those questions. We will also hold briefings. Concerning experience, that the team should have people who have certain regulatory experience. So that will be one of the factors considered during the recruitment exercise. I hope that you can hold briefings for them, for the potential candidates. I would like to know more about the functions of the TIA and TIC and so on. So TIC in future will just become an industry body. But what about the TAR, Travel Agents Registry? What will be its future role? Because right now it's mainly responsible for issuing licenses, managing the compensation fund, and the travel agents. So after the TIA has been established, what functions will it still play? Will the manpower and the budget be cut? Thank you, Mr. Au, for your question. For the TAR, its functions and role will be taken over by the TIA, and after the TIA has been established, the staff members of the TAR will be redeployed to other government departments in accordance with the usual civil service deployment mechanism. Paragraph 9 refers to the Travel Industry Compensation Fund, and its work will be taken up by the TIA. And many members of the public are concerned about whether we should pay the outbound tour levy. So members of the public are concerned about that. After the TIA is established, will the relevant mechanism be reviewed? Will the levy be still borne by the travel agents? Would this be a better approach?
Well, for TIA's levies, all along, this has been the responsibility of travel agents. As to who will be paying, whether the travel agent should be paying or the cost will be shifted onto consumers, there are no rules. When it comes to the levies, the travel agents would have to state clearly. That is, a certain percentage of the charge will be used for levies. So now you are just asking them to state it clearly, but maybe you should try to make improvements because this is a concern of people. First round, Dr. K.K. Kwok. Well, for this post, it will last for 2 years. I'm concerned if 2 years are enough for establishing the TIA and ensuring its smooth operation. In the past, the government has been applying for supernumerary posts, but there have been mistakes and then the posts have to be extended. So I don't want to see it here. And also for the number of visitors coming to Hong Kong now, it has reached another peak. But we are very concerned because most of these visitors are from the mainland and they are not overnight visitors. That means we only have one major source of visitors, and that is not a good phenomenon. Is there a problem with our tourism policy? Can the TIA do a better job? When some tourists come to Hong Kong, well, for some mainlanders, when they come to Hong Kong, they may create problems. For example, after the opening of the Hong Kong-Macau Bridge, you can see numerous mainland tourists flocking to Hong Kong, and things are very chaos. Then overseas tourists will be scared off, and many of these mainland tourists squat on the grounds, or even feces are left on the ground. That is really frightening. I don't know what the TIA can do to make improvements in these regards. So now you will have a new supernumerary post. How can he make sure that we won't have such a lopsided development in the future? And how can the chaotic situations brought about by the mainland tourists be resolved? Well, for your first question as to whether 2 years are sufficient, we believe that is sufficient when it comes to leading the preparatory team and preparing for the establishment of the TIA. As for your second question, the TC and the TIC have been trying to ensure that our sources of tourists are diversified. We spend 70% of our expenditure on attracting overseas tourists. And for mainland tourists, there has been a steady increase. For the number of tourists, there has been a steady increase. And the TIA will also be clamping down on unregulated tours. Well, there are problems caused by mainland tourists, but most of these mainland tourists are on unregulated tours. So after the establishment of the TIA, it will try its best to clamp down on such unregulated tours. So will it really be effective? Because many members or industry members with interest will be sitting on TIA. I don't know how many of them are related to those unregulated tours. This is a problem. Maybe the TC cannot keep everything under control, but if you go to Hong Kong or To Kwa Wan, you will see a lot of shops which are actually tourist traps. And this will smear Hong Kong's reputation. How can you crack down such operations? Well, TIA will be an independent and credible body. It's different from TIC in terms of composition. A lot of lay members will be sitting on TIA. Well, we have 3 members from TIC, 3 members from the outbound tourism trade, 3 members from the inbound tourist trades, and also there will be 4 members representing tourist guides and tour escorts. And also there will be lay members, 15 lay members. So it will be a credible organization. And also for TIA terms of reference, other than clamping down on unregulated tours, we will also be empowering the TIA so that it can carry out investigations. It can go to travel agents and investigate. So this will impose a more deterrent effect. So they will take care of the unregulated or unlicensed travel agents. How coming 4 minutes? I want to talk about NCSC again, and I hope that this can set a good precedence. But you are going back. You are telling us that for the TIC staff, they will be treated in the same way as other candidates. But we really want to keep experienced staff. I really hope that the TIC staff can be kept. As for insurance, we were promised that insurance will be included as an administrative measure. But your answer just now was not clear. So can you tell us now that you will have the administrative guidance in place so that insurance can be provided to the frontline workers and that they can work safely? So can this be done in writing? This is very important. And the Secretary. Just now, maybe Mr. Ho went out. With Mr. Yu, we will be talking more about this. We will handle this very seriously. Mr. Liu, thank you for your question. Well, for work insurance, Mr. Ho, I think you know a lot about this. Well, we really want to make it work for tourist guides and tour escorts. This is actually setting a precedent. We have already done a lot of work. Under the TIC, there are 3 committees, and there is one. Well, these committees cover inbound and outbound tours. They all support having a work support providing work insurance. But we couldn't reach a consensus at the last minute. But as the Secretary said just now, this is the right direction, so we are still working on it. Earlier on, there was an option, and while we were discussing it, we thought that it should not become a hurdle for our discussions. Now we are still discussing with the relevant stakeholders. Well, this post will only last for 2 years. So after the establishment of the TIA, can this be in black and white? Because I want this to be in writing. Can you tell me clearly that this new policy of yours will be in writing? Now you are dragging Mr. Yu into it. Mr. Yu is only there to help you. You are the government. If you want to do it, then that can be implemented. But now you are taking us down a garden path. You haven't told us whether this will be in writing. Are you sure this will be in black and white? Well, from the trade union's perspective, of course, you would like to see that. But for work insurance, we cannot just look at it from the perspective of trade unions, because the travel agents are the bosses. They have to foot the bill. So we have to take the views of both sides into consideration. Earlier on, there was a consensus, but now we have to review the consensus. This is the right direction, but we cannot give you a concrete timetable. Anyway, we will try our best. So even after the establishment of the TIC, this will not be realized. Well, you can ask your question later on. Oh, not in second round. Sorry, first round is for me. I want to ask about insurance as well. Well, if I hire a driver or a foreign domestic helper, I will take out insurance for them. So why is it so difficult for the travel agents? Well, for an employee, if he works for a particular travel agent, in the long run, if he's a long-term employee, then insurance will be taken out for him. Well, so we are talking about freelance tourist guides and tour escorts. And there are a lot of freelancers in other industries as well. So there are different practices. Well, providing our frontline workers with better protection is our direction. Now we have talked to Mr. Yu, the TIC travel agent representatives and frontline workers. We did have a consensus, but eventually one trade union objected to it, so the consensus was crushed. But now we hope that we can forge another consensus, and this is the right direction. Well, I understand that the government does not take out insurance for its frontline workers, then the government bears its own risk. So if a technician is injured, the technician can take the government to the court. But for the freelance frontline workers in the travel industry, if they are injured, can they insure the TIA? Can they prosecute the CIA? I would like to supplement. Now, TIA is a statutory regulator. It hires its own employees, and then in accordance with the employee compensation ordinance, TIA would have to take out insurance for its staff. But in the travel industry, there are two types of employees. One, long-term employees. They are long-term employees of travel agents, and their employer is the travel agent, and the travel agent would have to take out insurances for them. However, some tourist guides and tour escorts are freelancers. So today they may work for travel agents A, and tomorrow they may work for travel agents B. This is their modus operandi. Or they may have their own jobs, but during peak seasons they will still help certain travel agents out. So there is no official employment relationships, and they are not covered by the employment compensation ordinance. But when they take the tours out, they may encounter accidents, or they may get injured. So in the past decades, in this freelance frontline workers took out their own insurances.
So the discussion now is on how we can improve the protection for these freelance tour guides and tour escorts. And at the same time, we don't want to build an employer-employee relationship between the travel agents and the tour guides and tour escorts. So we discussed work insurance, and that is when a frontline tour guide or tour escort takes on a tour for 10 days, then the work insurance for those 10 days will be taken out by the tour guide and tour escort, but then the cost will be shared also by the travel agent. So the TIC subcommittees have agreed to such an arrangement, but at the last minute, there was one trade union which objected to it because they think the conditions are not good enough. So there is still room for further discussion. Now the bill has been enacted. It doesn't mean that we will stop our work. We will continue with our work. But as to how and when the work can be restarted, we'll have to go back to the TIC and the trade and also the relevant trade union and discuss the matter. But it's difficult for us to give you a specific timetable. That's one focus of our work, and it's a work that we place emphasis on. Mr. Liu, before the bill was passed, did the government undertake that the matter will be dealt with and resolved to ensure such freelance tour escorts will also be covered by insurance? Did you make any promises? No. Put simply, we didn't make a commitment on the exact time on when that can be done, but this is our major direction, and in the next 2 years we will have more time to further discuss the work insurance arrangement earlier proposed. We hope to get the support of the majority of the trade unions of our proposal. And then a new measure can be rolled out. Mr. Au Nok Hin, second round. Madam Chair, if you say that you can't make any promise that freelance issue can be dealt with after the TIA is established, I don't think it's desirable. You said that you would like to seek new consensus, but what kind of direction are you heading? Are you confident that you can get the support from the trade unions? Who will take the question? We will continue to talk to the different trade unions, different travel agents, like what the commissioner said. The issue involves both the employers and the employees. So we will keep up our work. Well, let's be more specific here. You said that you were near to reaching a consensus, and that is the freelance worker will take out his own insurance, but for the number of days that he works for the travel agent, the cost for the insurance in that period will be borne by the travel agent. Well, if I understand it correctly, then a trade union disagreed with that arrangement. Would you coming up with new proposals so that there can be a consensus? Let me cite an example. Say, for instance, different travel agents may have their funds pooled together and take out insurance for the worker. And whether, say, the worker works up to a certain days, maybe he works for travel agent A and B and C in the same month, then these travel agents will share out the cost for the insurance. Have you considered that kind of possibility? Well, let me follow up again, Madam Chair. In Appendix 1.5, you said that you have to include the job duties will include formulating subsidiary legislation. I believe that you will be formulating subsidiary legislation very soon. And if you can't include that issue in your subsidiary legislation, the matter will be stalled. Thank you. Mr. Au, for your question. Now, what other proposals do we have? That's your first question. When we had our discussion earlier, that is not the case that they have objection to our proposal in principle, and that is to say the tour escort will buy out the insurance and the cost will be borne by the travel agent. But I think the difference in opinion lies in whether the coverage can be higher and so on. So the difference is in the details in the insurance policy. We'll try to seek consensus as much as possible, and we'll talk further to the trade and the trade union. Now, second point about subsidiary legislation, work insurance. We said that we would do this in the form of administrative measure. So that doesn't fall within the ambit of subsidiary legislation. So that won't affect the progress of devising the subsidiary legislation. Madam Chair, I have a few more questions to ask. I think we have to look at several issues here. This is a supernumerary post at the TIA. You have to appoint the TIA chairman. How are you going to appoint the chairperson? It's difficult for someone from the civil service system to choose the appointment of the chairperson. It's not impossible, it's but difficult. But in paragraph 10H, you mentioned about public education. We always talk about the fact that a lot of members of the public are not clear about their rights under the Travel Industry Compensation Fund and the relevant system. So when you do your public education, would you also be publicizing that compensation fund as well? Well, you've gone over time, so Dr. Chan, please respond briefly. On publicity and public education, we will do it comprehensively, including what has been mentioned by the member, the transition arrangement, and the compensation fund. We would be publicizing all these. Let me also follow up, Madam Chair. Public education. You said that you will publicize it, the new measures among the stakeholders. Of course, that will be done. But then a lot of visitors will not know about their rights. I hope that after the TIA is established, please use whatever publicity means you can to educate the public about their rights under the compensation fund. Now, you said that you would organize public education activities, and expenses will also be incurred. So please give us also the sums. I also have another question on expenditure. Going forward, the first year of expenditure for TIAs is $65 million, and then you ask for a seed money. What would be the amount when you apply for funding from the LegCo Fund FC for approval? Mr. Au, I think the issue should have already been followed up at the EDP. Today's focus is on the creation of the post. But anyway, you've got some time left, so I ask Dr. Chan to respond briefly. There will be recurrent income that includes the licensing fee, the levies, the registration fee for mainland inbound tours, and also we would be coming to the LegCo to seek funding for the setting up of a seed money. It's $350 million. So the investment return will also be part of our recurrent expenditure. Any other member would like to ask a question? If not, then I would put this item to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your hand. Those who are against, please raise your hand. I think the question or the item is agreed by a majority of the members here. Is there a need to have separate voting? Well, then next move on to the next item, and that is the proposed creation of one supernumerary post of senior principal executive officer D2 in the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department, with immediate effect upon approval of the Finance Committee up to the 29th of June 2022 for the implementation of the regulatory regime on private columbaria. The administration has consulted the SH panel of the LegCo on the 13th of February 2018. We have Dr. Choi Yi-tak, Undersecretary for Food and Health, Mr. Guilford Law, PAS for Food and Health, and Mrs. Avia Lai Wong, Head Private Columbary Affairs Office, here with us. So, Dr. Kwok-Ki, you are the chair of the FESH panel. Please brief us on the deliberations of the panel. Please. The FESH panel discussed the item on the 13th of February 2018. Many members supported the creation of this post. Some members are concerned about the division of work between the proposed Assistant Director and the head of PACO, Private Columbary Affairs Office. The administration said that the head will be formulating the strategic direction for the office and supervise the work of the office. And the Assistant Director is responsible for providing directorate support for directorate staff, assist him in rolling out different systems and formulating work guides, including the licensing, enforcement, ash disposal, administration, finance, personnel, complaint handling, database, and public education, and so on and so forth. One of the duties of the proposed AD post is to assist the head to implement public education publicity activities. Some members believed that the post holder should be attending forums and briefings on the private columbarian ordinance organized by district offices of legislators and NGOs. The administration believed that the PACO has implemented a number of publicity and public education activities to enhance members of the public's awareness on the operators of private columbaria and the relevant regulations. And where resources and manpower permit, the PACO will participate in publicity activities organized by various stakeholders. Okay, 6 members. First, Mr. Ronick Chan, 5 minutes. I have a number of questions on the creation of this post. First, well, the ordinance took effect on the 30th of June 2017. So the applications for licensing starts on 30th of December 2017. What has happened in those 6 months? How come that the preparation time takes so long? And it says that up to December last year, 340 applications have been lodged by 140 operators. How many cases have been completed? You said that you would make a determination as soon as possible so that the supply can be resumed as soon as possible. But there are so many uncertainties now. Right now, we don't have any supply of private columbaria places now. So how is the progress of the work now? Now, I believe that you have completed the processing of some of the 340 applications. When will you complete all the processing of the applications? Now, the post will last till June 2022. Does it mean that you will complete all the processing of the applications by then, or do you mean that you will be extending the term further? So can I ask the head to take the technical questions first? For the 6 months of preparation, well, that was specified in the legislation. And during those 6 months, we had to first set up the licensing board, and that was set up in the 8th of September 2017. And after that, the application guidelines have to be drawn up, and the relevant codes have to be formulated. We all understand that this licensing system is a brand new one. We started from scratch.
This is a brand new licensing system, and it involves many areas. Now, if you apply for a license, you have to comply with building safety, fire safety, premises use rights, control of crowd, etc. So there are a lot of requirements to be met, and it's very complicated. So during the 6-month preparatory period, the licensing board has been working very hard. It has formulated detailed mechanisms, guidelines, rules, etc. Under the law, it is stated that after 6 months of the commencement, applications can be handled. So by the end of December last year, applications were officially accepted. And the law also states that at the end of the grace period or pre-cut-off column barrier must submit the applications by the deadline. And we have received 144 PCs applications for SIs, that is specified instruments. Now they have to meet complicated requirements. After the licensing board received the applications, it's discovered that all the applications did not submit a full set of required documents. So the licensing board is following up closely. They are asking the applicants to submit all the documents required. And then we would have to send the instruments or the documents to the relevant departments. For example, the fire service department, etc. They have to vet whether such applications are in order. The licensing board held 2 meetings earlier on, and they've vetted 2 applications. For one case, the license was granted. As for the other case, because land requirements still have to be met, so the license has not been issued yet. Dr. K.K. Kwok. I believe a lot of people are very concerned about this. Well, according to the government statistics, there are more than 360,000 PC niches. And some of these niches are in unregulated PCs, and there are also a lot of people living in the vicinity of such PCs. So the government should really do something to handle the PC problems. But the government's progress has been slow. But people living in the vicinity of PCs that are operating illegally, they are suffering a lot. Every year, our complaints division received numerous complaints regarding this. And a lot of family members of deceased persons are worried. Now, they have been cheated by certain PCs for buying illegal niches already. And they are worried that in the future, what will happen to the ashes of their deceased family members. So I hope that you will be very careful when it comes to issuing licenses. You have to ensure that the operators are working properly. Well, we are encouraging green burial, but I don't see a solutions now. You are saying that you have received 144 applications. You are happy that you have handled 2 cases. So when will this end? So you, the head will be getting a senior assistant. So before the end of his term, would all this work be done? Can you tell us the direction? I'm concerned about the residents living near illegal PCs, and I'm also concerned about the family members of the deceased persons. Well, some of the residents are worried that the illegal PCs near them would be turned legal, then it will be like a nightmare for them. And for the family members of deceased persons, how are you going to help them? Some of them wouldn't know what to do with the ashes of their deceased family members. So how will you help them? Head. Now, after the commencement of this ordinance, up to now, in Hong Kong and other areas, over 30 PCs have closed their businesses. So we have been following up. That is, our enforcement team has been following up. We asked them to follow the relevant ordinance strictly, and they have to handle the ashes properly. Over 20 of them have already done this properly. As for the remaining PCs, we have a dedicated website. The information can be found on the website, so the family members would know that these PCs are carrying out the disinterment of ashes procedures. As for other applicants, under the law, there are 3 specified instruments which they have to apply for. They include license exemption and temporary suspension of liability. For the instruments, temporary suspension of liability is for pre-cut-off columbaria to apply to. That means we give them a certain period of time so that they can ratify their work to make sure that they comply with planning, land use, building and fire safety requirements, etc. If they do not meet those requirements now, it will take quite a long time for them to meet the requirements. So for all these pre-cut-off columbaria, they have submitted their applications for TSOL. She hasn't answered me. Well, how about 2022? Would all the problems be resolved? And how can you assure that the family members can have a better arrangement? You ask them to go online. I asked her for a timetable. Okay, to give him a timetable. Can all the problems be solved by 2022? For the application for TSOL, I think we can take care of a big part of them. What do you mean by that? Well, for handling the applications, one thing is crucial. That is whether the applicant has submitted all the relevant information. If that is done, then we will ask the relevant government departments to handle them ASAP. So ASAP is our principle. Mr. O'Loughlin? I want to ask the question about enclosure 1. That is, it's about the job description of the assistant director. He would have to assist the head in supervising multidisciplinary team of staff in the PCAO and overseeing the overall administration of the PCAO. So do you mean lands department, planning department, etc.? Because there have been controversies in the past. For example, the Kerry go down in Chai Wan, the owner was so crazy that he was trying to turn it into a columbarium. It's fortunate that the planning department objected to it. In the future, you are going to formulate a policy. Can you tell the public very clearly that this will not happen again. That is, certain places can definitely not be turned into columbarium. So what's your view in this regard? Is this related to the new post? Well, for the interdepartmental coordination, we are talking about the SCs. When we handle the SCs, we may encounter problems, and the SCs may be related to different departments. So we have to have interdepartmental meetings. Now, if we are talking about a brand new PC, and if it doesn't comply with the planning rules, then it has to apply to the town planning department before a permission is given. Even though it gets a green light from the town planning board, it doesn't mean that it can comply with all the other requirements, because we have more requirements than town planning requirements. Yes, I understand. I have another question about ashes and about claimants, as well as the controversies among claimants. Now, you have a dispute resolve mechanism. How can that be improved? Now, somebody might have bought a niche, and that niche is being used. And if the ashes have to be displaced, but if the niche owner doesn't agree to do that, so what would you do? Well, this are about two issues. First, about the disposal of ashes. In the law, that is a very clear rule. Now, if a columbarium cannot operate anymore, then in accordance with the law, the ashes must be displaced. We have a very detailed guideline for the operators. And if the PCAO is aware of such a case, staff will talk to the operators, telling them how what needs to be done in great details. Some columbaria have already done that. Things have been smooth. And that's another question. It's about the buyer of the niche, and what will the compensation be in accordance with the agreement. So this is not about the law, it's about the agreement, because that is a civil agreement. It's signed by two parties, so they have to abide by the agreement. I have no other questions. Next, Mr. Chen Chichun. Madam Chair, of course, we support the creation of such a post. However, I am worried. I'm quite concerned about PCs. We have been working very hard to enact the ordinance, but it's an ordinance that's very difficult to implement. Just now, a question was asked, that is, for the 144 applications, how long will it take to handle all of them? I think just you have only officially granted one license is in Chunmun, and that's another case about Xinyun. I don't know what documents are lacking. So only last month, one case was approved. So what is happening to other applications? How long will it take? Or they still do not see the lights at the end of the tunnel? Of course, the responsibility does not lie with the licensing board. It's the operator's responsibilities.
Well, they have not been able to furnish a full set of information. That has been one of the reasons that we've heard in the early days. And they still continue not being, they haven't, no matter how you pursue or chase after them, then they won't be able to furnish you with full information. So what will happen? Now, we regionally have 144, and there were 3 cases which have been withdrawn, and 1 hasn't been coming with the full set of information. So, does it mean that these cases will be closed or what? And ash disposal procedures have to start. Now, if ash disposal is triggered, then that's a in relation to the compensation and so on, it's a matter that is to be prescribed by the agreement. Now we have this regime, and for whatever reason, ash disposal procedures have to be started. But then the buyer has paid the money, and then you said that it's up to the buyer to argue with the operator. Does it mean that the government doesn't have any role at all? Well, I have many questions. Please answer them. Head, please answer them one by one. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the 2 cases which have been scrutinized, and we will be looking at the 3rd case on the 7th of March. So for operators which have met with the requirements, we will deal with them ASAP. So you handle 1 case every few months. So how long will it take to complete all the cases? As I explained just now, why do we have this specified instrument, TSOL? And that is really for those operators who cannot get a license or exemption in a short time. We will keep on handling the applications, and for the operator which has met with the requirement of TSOL, the licensing board can issue them with the TSOL. And the law says that the TSOL holders will be allowed 3 years, and for extension another 3 years. That means a total of 6 years for the operator to meet with the requirements related to the license and the exemption. So we will be handling the cases based on this requirements. Well, Madam Chair, she hasn't answered my question. For this year, how many cases do you expect that you will complete in handling? So if they can't give you the information, ultimately, does it mean that they have to start the ash disposal procedures? And for the 4 out of the 144, does it mean that they have already started the ash disposal procedures? Now, for cases whereby they have been withdrawn, and for no concrete information is being provided, well, we have already made an announcement on our website that these are the cases, and they haven't even started operations, so there is no question of ash disposal. And for the others, they have already already completed or taking forward the ash disposal, and all the information is set on our website. And during the application period, if they can't give you all the information, would you be giving them an indefinite period to provide the information, or is there a deadline imposed on them, after which they have to start ash disposal? Head, we will try our best to assist the applicants, and we will give them time, and we will explain clearly to them the information needed. Of course, the licensing board will act with reasons and say come a certain stage whereby the full set of information cannot be furnished, the licensing board will handle the application in accordance with the law. Next one, Mr. Alvin Young. The first point, well, the bill was enacted on the 30th of June 2017. So the application for the creation of the post is 13th of December I don't know why there was such a long time gap before we get to discuss the paper today. What is the reason? Are there problems with the administration? Are there any obstacles? Because this post holder is there to do concrete work, and I don't see any contention with this post, and there is no political contention, whatever, related to this post. So how come that there is a time gap of 1 year? This is a very good question. Dr. Choi. Thank you, Madam Chair. After we discussed the need in the panel, and we will go by the established procedures to submit the proposal. And we have already done it as soon as we could. So we hope that you could scrutinize it as soon as possible too. So it seems from the Undersecretary's answer that there is no problem with the administration. So is there a problem with the Civil Service Bureau or FSTB or what? How come that when some items could jump the gun and was advanced for a discussion, but for this important issue on this post, we'll have to wait for 1 year? Now, it's been a long time. Why? Undersecretary. Well, our Bureau is not in the position to ask why it took so long. But I would say that this proposal will impact on those buyers of niches, and so we hope that this could be dealt with ASAP. Can the FSTB help with answering the question? Ms. Yun? Yes. When we put up the agenda, we would take a comprehensive view of the different items, and at the same time we would talk to the relevant bureaus and departments on the appropriate timing for introducing the item to the ESC or the FC. I don't have the information on hand on the timing for this particular item, but when we really draw up the agenda, we would be taking a comprehensive view and talk to the relevant policy bureaus. For items which are pressing, we would definitely not put them towards the back of the agenda. We would look at the needs, the policy needs, and so on and so forth. I don't want to make things difficult for the DS. I think this is a serious problem. That this is a serious time lag. We're talking about 1 year, and for this item, it's not controversial at all. And I think it's very unfair to the head and her colleagues, who I believe are working very hard, and I would like to express my grave concern on this. And FSTB, please take a look. You should not put this item, to us so late. And if we go to the FC, it should be advanced to the top of the agenda. So that's my stance. And then another question. From October last year to now, there have been 340 applications from 140 private columbary operators. What is the latest figure? We now have 140 private columbary operators. One case has been withdrawn, and for 4 cases we've rejected them, and 1 case has been withdrawn. So after the deadline, there is only one. There has been only been 1 new application received. So before 29th of June 2022, are you confident that you will clear the backlog of applications? Head, we will do our best. We will conduct a review then. There are so many tasks for this post holder by reading the paper. So can he handle all the tasks? Undersecretary. We have the head and also this proposed post. We believe that they can clear the backlog of cases. They had said that they would try to work as fast as they could. And I think for the cases that have been dealt with, we've got some experience which will help them in handling the cases in the future. We will work on faster. Well, please think carefully. Very seldom will members are willing to give you more posts. Mr. Tong, Chair. The issues are very complicated here. Madam Chair, you will recall that we spent some 2 years in scrutinizing this bill, and ultimately the bill was not passed in the last term of Legislative Council. And that also shows that the electrical has not been working very effectively. We have been working very slowly, hence the delay. If legislators are really concerned about this issue, I think legislators should consider how we should scrutinize the bill more effectively. This bill straddles 2 terms of Legislative Council. I believe that the administration had underestimated the resources needed at an early stage. Now they have to face up to the reality. They need to add in new posts, and I think that's. I support this. Some members are concerned whether this goes far enough. In paragraph 17, it says that apart from this post, some non-directed staff members will be supporting this post holder. There will be some 60 non-directorate staff. Are these newly added posts, or only some of them are newly added posts? Madam Chair, you talked about whether 3 years are enough. Well, you talked about the 3-year period for the TSOL. When the clock has started to tick, then it will be less than 3 years now. Now, what will happen after 3 years? And members are concerned whether you are confident in handling all these applications within a certain period. I understand it's very difficult to answer that question because it involves 2 sides. If the applicants don't provide full set of information, then there's nothing you can do. And then you have to consider whether the applicants are deliberately avoiding to provide certain information, or some applicants may have done their best to provide the information. So concerning the 3 years, I wonder whether you have the discretion to extend the period further. I'm not familiar with the law. And then there are also some other technical issues. The Lands Department may be involved. I recall that other government departments have created new posts because of this ordinance, and the head, you said that you would like to create this new post, but have other government departments conducted a review on whether there are sufficient manpower resources? Well, I hope that all the issues could be resolved within a certain period. For the 60 or so posts, well, the office is a newly established one for implementing the ordinance. So all the staff are new ones. Now, after the 3 years of TSOL have expired, but then the applicants have not been able to meet the requirements of exemption or land license, they have to apply to the licensing board to extend the TSOL. And then the licensing board will take a look at whether in the past 3 years the applicant has done all it can to try to get the qualifications for the license or the exemption before considering the extension of TSOL.
The other departments have been consulted about their needs, so resources will also be fought for them. I have asked all my questions. I support this post. Mr. Holden Chow, for the private columbarium issues, I'm sure there are a lot of difficulties. For paragraphs 11 to 14 is about the need for the creation of the proposed ADPC post. Now, it's a very complicated post. It has to take care of licensing and law enforcement, although there are 60 officers to assist him. However, for licensing, it's already very complicated, and enforcement itself is not an easy task. So I would like to ask you, do you think it's enough to just have one SPEO doing the job? Do you have enough manpower? And about law enforcement, in paragraph 14, you say that for unlicensed PCs, they will have to do a lot of things. For example, carry out disposal of ashes, displaced from abandoned PCs, etc. So for illegal PCs, you may have to do the follow-up work for them. That is disposal of ashes. And the family members may take civil actions afterwards. So after the ash disposal, where will the ashes go? So will the enforcement team provide support to the family members? Other than law enforcement and ash disposal, what will you do? I hope your work doesn't end here. Would you provide follow-up support to the family members? Head? As to whether we have enough manpower, if there is a need, we will reflect our needs to the Bureau. Thank you for your concern. As for law enforcement, if PCs operate illegally and if ashes have to be disposed of, well, of course, they would have to follow the law to do that. And also, we can provide information to family members. That is, what other ways are available for ashes disposal. For example, FEHD has temporary facilities for storing ashes. I'm glad to hear that you would provide information and support. But when it comes to implementation, there may be problems because family members may not know what to do. So other than providing information to them, I hope you can also understand their urgent needs. So please try to provide them with more help. Mr. Adiji? Thank you, Madam Chair. My feeling is that this is not just about family members. Now there are over 100 applicants, and in particular those applying for TSOL, they are like villains. Well, you say that the TSOL would last for 3 + 3 years, but now even the submission of forms would take 3 years. When I go to your website, I can see the present status. I'm just talking about the TSOL. I'm not even talking about the exemption or the actual license. I'm just talking about the TSOL. Well, for those pending forms, 70, well, actually only 6 of them have submitted relevant documents. So there is this group of people. They are just procrastinating. You don't have a deadline for them. Just now, Mr. Ray Chen also asked about this. We're not talking about the actual license. We're just talking about the TSOL. And there's no deadline for submitting forms. So the 3 + 3 years is meaningless. Well, because I think by 2022, they still would not hand in their relevant documents. So it's not about inadequate manpower. You don't need much manpower because nobody's submitting the TSOL. So how long will you wait? Is there no deadline? And by 2022, they still haven't submitted anything, and you will not take any action? Well, that is called a temporary suspension of liability, but they need to provide a lot of documents. For example, they need a professional to prove that the premises is free of building and fire safety problems. They also need to provide provide plans covering ash interment layout. Well, don't play tricks. Well, that applicant has just handed in 3 pages. And for fire safety, they have to meet the relevant requirements, etc. The licensing board would handle things in a reasonable manner. Well, please don't take us down the garden path. Can you give me a direct answer? So by 2022, they are still allowed not to provide you the relevant information. I don't believe that the licensing board will not reject the application if they do not submit enough documents by 2022. But now a year has passed already. Even after 1 year, they haven't submitted anything. They just raised their hands and they didn't submit anything. We have been following up with the applicants. At a certain stage, if the licensing board thinks that no grace period will be given further, then they will make a determination concerning the applications. So what do you mean? So they won't wait till 2022. However, you won't force them because it's very complicated. So, can you give me a more concrete timetable? That's reasonable, Madam Chair. Well, this is up to the licensing board. They will look at things comprehensively. It will do things reasonably and in accordance with the law. But now you are creating a void so that these people can play tricks en masse. So all of them will refuse to hand in the TSOL. What can you do? I would like to stress on a point. You should understand this. At the moment, they cannot sell niches. So this will be a big incentive for them to comply with the requirements ASAP. Because if they do not have a license, they cannot sell new niches and they cannot have new income. Dr. Fernando Chia, I would like to follow up on Mr. Eddie Chu's concern. You are saying that now they cannot do business, so they want to do it as soon as possible. However, for the PCs, they have been using different means. And they even resorted to cheating. They did things that did not meet people's expectation, that they have hygiene problems, they use improper means to do their business, etc. So that's why there have been a lot of grievances, and as a result, you've enacted this piece of legislation. But now you are leaving a loophole. And some of the PCs are dragging their feet. In your reply to Mr. Chu, you were evading the question. You should set a deadline. Administratively, you should set a deadline. That is, you require them to submit all the documents within a shortened period of time. Now, even after 1 year, they cannot submit one single form. What do they need to do? Why does it take so long? For example, you can tell them within 6 months, if you fail to hand in the form, then certain things will be done. Would that be possible? Can you set a deadline so that the PCs cannot procrastinate forever? Yes, we will look into the members' suggestion. And for the method of consultation, I think there is a big loophole. On the 17th of January and 31st of January this year, the licensing board vetted 2 applications for TSOL. For these 2 PCs, during the consultations, there were 0 comments. Well, NGOs have been consulting stakeholders, residents, and Twin Moon DC, but they didn't know anything about it. So this reflects that the consultation channel is not efficient. You say that you are posting on your website and you are putting up notices in that area, but that's not efficient. So before creating this post, maybe you should better your consultation process. You should contact the residents directly, talk to the district councillors, the OCs, etc. Now you have to understand the background for this piece of legislation. We are now tackling a historical legacy which has lasted for decades. So we have to be practical and compassionate. For most of the applications received by the licensing board, they are from pre-cut-off columbaria. And we have to ensure that they comply with planning requirements. Now we have handled 2 applications, and they have already gone through the planning permission procedures. And the town planning board has conducted public consultations. It has followed all the proper procedures. And for the ash internment capacity, it cannot exceed the set capacity. So public consultation has already been included. And also on our website, we have made public announcements, and outside the premises, we have put up a notice. So they are not willing to change. You have had manpower, but we are talking about official licensing. In the past, there wasn't such a piece of legislation. Now you're officially giving them licenses. But the residents in the vicinity don't even know, and you haven't even notified the district councillors. Why don't you improve it? As for improving the consultation process, I think we should talk about it next time, because now our meeting time has come to an end. So for our next meeting is next Friday, 8:30. It will last for 4 hours. For Wednesday, we will have to give the slot to PWSC. You want to pass this as soon as possible so that more manpower can be given to the PACL. So next Friday we will have a 4-hour meeting. Thank you.